The warning came at midnight. Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador Thelvori stood in the great council chamber of Station Prime, her crystalline body catching the light of 1,000 holographic screens. She had served the Galactic Concord for 300 years. She had seen wars, plagues, and the rise and fall of empires. But she had never seen fear like this. Every screen showed the same message. Red symbols flashed in 800 languages. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of extinction. The Vrethkai had returned. Thelvori remembered the old stories. Her grandmother had told them to her when she was young, back when her crystal form was still soft and growing. The Vrethkai were not like other enemies. They were not a species that wanted territory or resources or power. They were hunger itself, a swarm of living machines that moved between galaxies, eating everything in their path. Stars, planets, moons, ships, and people. All of it became food for their endless appetite. The ancient records said they had destroyed 1,000 galaxies before they disappeared into the dark spaces between stars. Now, after millions of years of silence, they had returned. Around her, the council chamber descended into chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species screamed and pushed toward the exits. The tall, blue-skinned Morvani were already activating emergency transport beacons. The insect-like Kethra clicked their mandibles in panic as they called for their hidden dimension gates. The proud warrior race of the Tethnari, who had never retreated from any battle, were quietly gathering their families and loading them onto evacuation ships. In 72 hours, the greatest alliance in galactic history fell apart. Thelvori watched it happen with a heavy heart. 12,000 years of peace and cooperation vanished like morning mist. Species that had traded together, built together, and explored the stars together now thought only of escape. They did not discuss defense. They did not talk about fighting back. They simply ran. She understood their fear. The Vrethkai were not an enemy you could defeat. They were a force of nature, like a black hole or a supernova. You did not fight such things. You fled from them, or you died. On the third day, Thelvori walked through the empty corridors of Station Prime. The great markets were abandoned. The diplomatic halls were silent. The parks where children of a dozen species had once played together were now filled with nothing but the echo of her footsteps. She was preparing to leave for the Andromeda Galaxy when she saw the light. One room in the human embassy still glowed with activity. Through the window, she could see figures moving, voices talking, screens displaying star maps and ship positions. Thelvori stopped and stared. She had almost forgotten about the humans. They were a young species, barely 300 years into space travel. Their technology was primitive compared to the elder races. They had no dimensional gates, no reality shields, no weapons that could crack planets. In the great hierarchy of galactic civilization, they were considered children, promising, perhaps, but still learning to walk among the stars. She entered the embassy and found Ambassador Elena Vasquez sitting at a long table covered with reports. The human woman looked tired. Her dark hair had streaks of gray, and deep lines marked her face. But her eyes were sharp and focused. "Ambassador Thelvori," Elena said, looking up. "I thought everyone had left by now." "I am leaving tomorrow," Thelvori replied. "My ship is prepared. We have found a route to Andromeda. That should be safe." Elena nodded slowly. "I hope you make it." "Truly, I do." Something in her voice made Thelvori pause. "You speak as if you are not coming." "We are not." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Thelvori felt her crystal form vibrate with shock. "That is suicide. The Vrethkai will reach your system within months. Your fleet cannot stop them. Your weapons cannot hurt them. You have no way to escape to another galaxy." Elena stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant in the endless black. "You are correct. We have no way to run. Earth is our only home. Humanity has no colony ships fast enough to reach safety, no technology to hide us from the swarm. Then why do you stay? Why not try to escape? Elena turned back to face her. There was something in her expression that Thelvori did not understand. It was not despair, though despair would have made sense. It was not madness, though madness would have been forgivable. It was something else entirely. Because running is not who we are, Elena said softly. We have faced extinction before, Ambassador. Ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly destroyed us. Every time, we survived not by running, but by fighting. By standing together and refusing to give up. The Vrethkai are not an ice age. They have destroyed civilizations 1,000,000 years older than yours. I know. Elena smiled, and there was sadness in it, but also something fierce and bright. But if we are going to die, we will die standing up. We will die fighting, and maybe, just maybe, we will hurt them badly enough that someone else will have a chance. Thelvori stared at the small human woman for a long moment. She had lived for 3 centuries and met thousands of species. She had seen bravery and cowardice, wisdom and foolishness, but she had never seen anything quite like this. You are either the bravest species I have ever met, she said finally, or the most foolish. Elena laughed, a short, tired sound. Probably both. That has always been our way. Thelvori left Station Prime the next morning. As her ship folded space toward distant Andromeda, she looked back at the small blue dot that was Earth's sun. She expected she would never see it again. The first Vrethkai scout ships appeared at the edge of human space on a Tuesday morning. General Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the sensor data scroll across his screen. The enemy vessels were strange and terrible. They looked like living things, with hulls that pulsed like beating hearts and weapons that grew from their bodies like claws. Each ship was the size of a small moon. There were thousands of them. Behind him, his tactical officer spoke in a voice that shook slightly. Sir, preliminary scans show approximately 12,000 enemy vessels in the Vanguard alone. Our entire fleet numbers less than 800 combat-ready ships. Chen nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come. For 3 months, humanity had prepared for war, while the rest of the galaxy fled. 3 months of desperate work, sleepless nights, and impossible choices. What about the civilian conversions? He asked. The officer checked her datapad. 6,000 mining vessels have been equipped with weapons. 4,000 cargo ships are carrying nuclear payloads. 2,000 agricultural freighters have been converted to medical and support roles. 10,000 ships that had never been meant for war, crewed by people who had never been soldiers. Miners, traders, farmers, and teachers who had volunteered to fight because there was no one else. Chen thought about his daughter, who was 16 years old and currently learning to operate a weapons system on a converted passenger liner. He thought about his wife, who was organizing medical supplies on Mars. He thought about his father, who had come out of retirement to work in a munitions factory. Everyone was fighting. Everyone. On Earth, the transformation had been total. Schools now taught emergency engineering and basic combat medicine, alongside mathematics and history. Factories that once made cars and computers now produced missiles and armor plating. Restaurants had become supply distribution centers. Sports stadiums had become training grounds. Even the children helped, sorting medical supplies and carrying messages. The message had spread across human space like wildfire, not from any government order but from the people themselves. It appeared on walls and screens, in songs and speeches, in the quiet conversations of families preparing for the worst. We are not running. We are not hiding. If we die on our feet. Chen had seen the videos that people uploaded to the network. A grandmother teaching her grandchildren how to load ammunition. A group of university students working through the night to improve shield technology. A man who had lost both legs in an accident, sitting in a wheelchair and calibrating targeting systems with steady hands. No one complained. No one asked why they should fight an impossible battle. They simply worked and prepared and waited for the enemy to come. Now the enemy was here. Chen turned to face his crew. They were young, most of them. Many had never seen real combat. But their eyes were steady, and their hands were calm on their controls. "I want a message sent to every ship in the fleet," he said. "Yes, sir. What message?" Chen thought for a moment. There were many things he could say. He could give them statistics and battle plans. He could remind them of duty and honor. He could make promises he could not keep. Instead, he spoke simply. "Tell them this. The galaxy believes we are already dead. They think we are fools for staying. Children who do not understand the danger we face. They may be right. But I would rather die fighting beside all of you than live forever running away." He paused, watching the enemy ships grow larger on the screen. "Today we show them what humans are made of. Today we prove that courage is not about winning. It is about standing up when everyone else sits down. It is about fighting when everyone else runs away. It is about being willing to pay a price that others will not pay. We may not survive this war, but we will make them remember us. We will hurt them so badly that they will never forget the small blue planet that refused to die quietly. We will carve our names into their memory with fire and blood." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had made peace with death. "So let them come. Let them bring their whole swarm. We have something they have never faced before. We have nothing left to lose. My ace, ace, ace." The message spread across the fleet in seconds. On 10,000 ships, humans heard his words and felt something stir in their hearts. Fear was still there, cold and heavy. But something else rose above it. Something older and fiercer. Pride. Defiance. The stubborn, foolish, magnificent refusal to surrender. On a converted mining ship, a woman named Sarah kissed a photograph of her children and powered up her weapons. On a medical frigate, a doctor named James finished preparing his surgery bay and said a quiet prayer. On a cargo vessel packed with nuclear warheads, an old man named William thought about his wife, who had died 10 years ago, and hoped he would see her soon. They were not soldiers. They were teachers and doctors, miners and farmers, artists and engineers. They were ordinary people who had been given an impossible task, but they were human. And humans had always been too stupid, too stubborn, and too brave to know when they were beaten. The Vrethkai swarm moved toward them like a tide of darkness, confident in their ancient power, certain of their victory. They had no idea what was coming. The Battle of Proxima Centauri began at dawn. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka sat in the cockpit of her mining vessel, watching the Vrethkai swarm descend upon the human colony below. The enemy ships moved with terrible grace, their living hulls shifting and changing as they prepared to feed. They had done this 1 billion times before, on 1 billion worlds. They expected no resistance. Yuki was 34 years old. Before the war, she had spent her days drilling into asteroids and hauling ore back to processing stations. It was quiet work, lonely work, but she had liked it. She had a daughter named May, who was 7 years old, and loved to draw pictures of spaceships. She had a husband named Kenji, who made the best noodles in the colony. She would never see them again. She had made her peace with that. "Mining Vessel 17, you are cleared for attack run." The voice crackled through her radio. "May God be with you." Yuki smiled and pushed her engines to full power. Her ship was old and slow, never designed for combat, but it was carrying something special in its cargo hold. 300 tons of antimatter, enough to crack a small moon. The Vrethkai did not notice her at first. She was just one small ship among thousands, a tiny speck of metal flying toward their formation. Their attention was focused on the bigger targets. the military vessels that were firing missiles and energy weapons in desperate waves. Yuki flew straight toward the largest enemy ship, a massive creature that looked like a twisted combination of whale and spider. It was the command vessel for this section of the swarm, the brain that controlled 1,000 smaller ships. At 500 kilometers, the Vrethkai finally noticed her. Weapons swiveled in her direction. Smaller ships broke off to intercept. At 200 kilometers, the first shots hit her hull. At 50 kilometers, Yuki opened a channel to her family. She knew they would receive the message later. After the battle was over. After she was gone. May, my little star, Mama loves you very much. Be brave and be kind. Kenji. Take care of our girl. I am sorry I cannot come home. But I am not afraid. I am doing what I must do. At 10 kilometers, she activated the antimatter. The explosion was visible from Earth. The command vessel died in a flash of white light. 500 smaller ships around it were vaporized instantly. The shockwave crippled 1,000 more. In one moment, a single mining vessel crewed by a single brave woman had done more damage than the entire human fleet had managed in the first hour of battle. And she was not alone. Across the battlefield, humans were fighting with a creativity born of desperation. Captain Omar Hassan led his cargo ship into an asteroid field, dodging between rocks while the Vrethkai chased him. When they followed him into the field, he triggered the explosives his crew had planted on 100 asteroids. The rocks became weapons, crushing enemy ships like insects. Engineer Lisa Wong discovered that the Vrethkai ships were confused by certain radio frequencies. She broadcast static on every channel, creating chaos in the enemy formation. Ships crashed into each other. Attack patterns fell apart. For precious minutes, the swarm stumbled like a blind man. Pilot David Okonkwo rammed his dying cruiser into the mouth of a Vrethkai hive ship. As his vessel exploded inside the enemy, he laughed and sang his grandmother's favorite song. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it was over, the human fleet had lost 60% of its ships. Proxima Centauri colony was burning. 8 million people had died in the fighting and the aftermath. By any reasonable measure, it was a defeat. But the Vrethkai had lost something too. 12 command vessels destroyed. 8,000 smaller ships crippled or dead. For the first time in 100 million years, the swarm had paid a real price for a meal. Deep in the heart of the Vrethkai collective consciousness, something stirred. The swarm shared one mind, one memory that stretched back to the birth of the universe. In all that time, in all those conquered galaxies, they had never experienced anything like this. The prey had fought back. Not just fought back, but hurt them, damaged them, made them bleed. The other species had always run. They had begged and screamed and died. Some had tried to negotiate. Some had offered tribute. Some had hidden. But none of them had ever attacked with such fury, such complete disregard for their own survival. These small, soft creatures in their primitive ships had thrown themselves at the swarm like they wanted to die. But they had not died like victims. They had died like predators, taking as much of the enemy with them as they could. The swarm did not feel fear. Fear was for lesser beings. But they felt something new. Something that made them pause and recalculate. Caution. Across the fleeing galaxy, in ships running toward distant safety, the survivors of the Galactic Concorde watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. The humans were still fighting. The humans were still there. And somehow, impossibly, they were making the ancient enemy hesitate. Ambassador Thelvori watched the footage of Yuki Tanaka's final flight. She watched the woman smile as she flew toward certain death. She listened to the message to her daughter. And for the first time in 300 years, Thelvori felt something she had thought lost forever. Hope. 6 months into the war, humanity was dying. The battles had been brutal and endless. Every week brought new losses, new names added to the list of the dead. Earth's moon had been cracked in half by a Vrethkai bombardment. Mars' colony was a ruin. The great shipyards of Jupiter had been consumed by the swarm. But humanity was still fighting. General Chen stood in his command room, looking at maps covered in red markers. Red meant enemy territory. Red meant death. There was very little that was not red anymore. "We have perhaps 2 months of supplies left," his advisor told him. "Our fleet is down to 30% strength. The civilian volunteers are exhausted. Many of them have not slept in days." Chen nodded slowly. He had not slept much either. None of them had. "And the Vrethkai? They have slowed their advance. Our tactics are confusing them. But they are adapting. They are learning." That was the worst part. The swarm learned from every battle, every trick, every sacrifice. The strategies that had worked in the first month no longer worked now. Humanity was running out of surprises. But they had learned too. Human scientists had captured pieces of Vrethkai technology. They had studied the enemy's living ships, their weapons, their communication systems. Slowly, painfully, they had begun to understand how the swarm worked. Dr. Amara Osei had discovered that the Vrethkai shared one mind through a network of signals. If you could disrupt those signals with the right electromagnetic pulse, the swarm would fall into chaos. It would only last for minutes, but minutes could win battles. Engineer Raj Patel had found a way to modify human weapons to pierce Vrethkai armor. The new missiles were 10 times more effective than the old ones. Pilot Maria Santos had developed flight patterns that the enemy could not predict, based on ancient human dance movements and sports strategies. Humanity was fighting with everything they had. Their bodies, their minds, their culture, their history, everything that made them human had become a weapon, and the galaxy was watching. 2 million light-years away, Ambassador Thelvori stood before the Council of Refugees. The great species of the Galactic Concord had gathered in a hidden station at the edge of the Andromeda Galaxy. They had run here to survive, to wait out the storm, to hope that the Vrethkai would eventually move on. But the storm was not passing, and something strange was happening. "The humans have held Sol System for 6 months, Thelvori said. Her crystalline voice rang through the silent chamber. "By every calculation, they should have been destroyed in the first week. Instead, they have killed more Vrethkai than any species in recorded history." The Morvani representative rippled with doubt. "They are dying. Their world is burning. What does it matter if they kill a few of the enemy? The swarm is infinite." "The swarm is not infinite," Thelvori replied. "That is what we have learned. The Vrethkai have limits. They can be hurt. They can be slowed. They can be fought. By dying." The Kethra clicked his mandibles in anger. "The humans are committing suicide. They have no hope of victory. No. They have no hope of survival. Those are different things." Thelvori activated a hologram. It showed the Battle of Titan, where a human fleet had sacrificed itself to destroy a Vrethkai spawning ground. 7,000 ships, gone. 40 million Vrethkai dead. "They know they cannot win," she said softly. "They know they are going to die. But they are fighting anyway, because they believe that even a doomed fight has value. They believe that standing up matters, even when you know you will fall." She looked around the chamber at the representatives of 100 species. Beings who had lived for thousands of years. Beings who had built civilizations that spanned galaxies. Beings who had run away and hidden while children and farmers flew converted mining ships into the heart of the enemy. "I am going back," Thelvori said. The chamber erupted in shock and protest. But she raised her hand for silence. "I am 300 years old. I have lived a long and full life. I have seen wonders that most beings cannot imagine, and I am tired of being a coward." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The humans taught me something I had forgotten. There are things worth dying for. Honor is worth dying for. Courage is worth dying for. Standing beside those who refuse to give up is worth dying for. If you want to stay here and hide, I understand. I was hiding too, until today. But I will not hide anymore. I will not let them fight alone." She walked out of the chamber. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, others stood and followed her. First, the Aelthin, her own people, their crystal bodies shimmering with new determination. Then the Morvani, their blue skin darkening with resolve. Then the Kethra, their clicking mandibles speaking words of war. Within a day, 300 species had committed their fleets to the fight. They did not believe they could win. The mathematics had not changed. The Vrethkai were still vast and powerful and ancient, but the mathematics did not matter anymore. Somewhere, in the burning ruins of Sol system, humans were standing up against the darkness, and the galaxy had remembered how to stand with them. Hope, it turned out, was contagious. The final battle began on a morning that would never be forgotten. General Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the largest fleet in galactic history assemble around him. Ships of every shape and size filled the space between Earth and Mars. Crystal vessels from the Aelthin floated beside the massive organic ships of the Morvani. The dimensional gates of the Kethra opened and closed, bringing more warriors from their hidden realms. Even the Ithari had come, their ancient ships bending light itself as they moved into position. 300 species, 20 million ships. The galaxy had come home, and before them, filling the sky like a living wall of darkness, waited the Vrethkai. The swarm had gathered everything it had for this final attack. Billions of ships, stretching from Jupiter to the asteroid belt. At the center of the formation floated the Queen herself, a creature the size of a small moon, the ancient intelligence that controlled the entire swarm. She had fed on 1,000 galaxies. She had consumed civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth's sun was born. She did not understand fear, or mercy, or surrender. She understood only hunger. Today, that hunger would end. Chen opened a channel to every ship in the combined fleet. His voice was calm and steady, the voice of a man who had been fighting for so long that fear had become an old friend. This is General Marcus Chen of the human fleet. I want to thank all of you for coming. I know many of you thought we were fools for staying. I know many of you believed this was a war that could not be won. He paused, looking at the holographic display that showed ships from species he had never met. Beings who had traveled millions of light years to stand beside humanity in this final hour. Maybe you were right. Maybe we are fools. But today, we are fools together. Today, we are not human, or Aelthin, or Morvani, or Kethra. Today, we are something new. We are the answer to every world the Vrethkai have ever silenced. We are the voice of every species that died without hope. The swarm began to move, surging forward like a tide of hunger and ancient malice. They believe we are prey. They believe we will break and scatter and die alone in the dark, like all the others. Today, we show them the truth. Today, we teach them what it means to face a galaxy that has remembered its courage. He drew his ceremonial sword, a blade that had belonged to his great-grandfather, and raised it toward the approaching enemy. For every world that fell, for every species that was forgotten, for every child who will never be born if we fail today. Forward, all ships, forward, and may whatever gods you believe in watch over us all. The fleet surged to meet the swarm. The battle lasted 9 days. On the first day, the Aelthin crystal ships created a wall of focused light that burned through the enemy vanguard. On the second day, the Morvani released their bioweapons, plagues designed to eat through the living hulls of Vrethkai vessels. On the third day, the Kethra opened their dimensional gates inside enemy ships, tearing them apart from within. And through it all, the humans fought with the desperate fury that had brought them this far. They rammed their ships into enemy vessels. They flew suicide missions into swarm clusters. They died by the millions, but they took the enemy with them. On the 6th day, they reached the Queen. She was vast beyond imagination, a mountain of living metal and ancient hunger. Her mind controlled the entire swarm through signals that crossed light years in an instant. She had survived for longer than most stars. She did not believe she could die. She was wrong. Dr. Amara Osei had spent months developing the weapon. It was an electromagnetic pulse tuned to the exact frequency of the Queen's neural network. It would not kill her directly, but it would blind her, cut her off from her swarm for precious minutes, long enough for 12 ships from 12 species to fly directly into her heart. Ambassador Thelvori piloted one of those ships. She was 312 years old, and she had never felt more alive than she did in that moment. Beside her flew humans and Morvani and Kethra and beings from worlds she had never visited. They flew together into the darkness. The Queen died screaming, a sound that echoed through the minds of every being in the galaxy. The swarm, severed from her controlling intelligence, fell into chaos. Ships crashed into each other. Attack patterns collapsed. The ancient, perfect coordination that had destroyed 1,000 galaxies shattered like glass. The Allied fleet poured through the gaps, hunting down the confused enemy, destroying them by the millions. What had been an unstoppable force became scattered, lost, and vulnerable. The battle ended on the 9th day. The last Vrethkai ships were burned from the sky above Earth. The swarm that had haunted the universe since before time was measured had finally been extinguished. The galaxy had won. 100 years later, a monument stood at the edge of Sol System. It was a ring of stone and light, visible from a dozen light years away. On its surface were carved the names of every being who had died in the war. Billions of names, in 1,000 languages, representing every species that had fought and bled and sacrificed. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see it. They came to remember, to mourn, to celebrate, and to learn. At the base of the monument, in letters that shone with captured starlight, were carved the words that had become the motto of a new galactic civilization. They fled. We fought. Together, we won. And above those words, in smaller letters, was a single name. Yuki Tanaka, pilot, mother, hero. She had been the first to show them the way. She would never be forgotten. None of them would.